Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. Our tradition is to go around and introduce ourselves first before we hear from our speaker. Just by a show of hands, is there anyone here for the first time or returning after a long absence? Great. We will go around and try and remember your names as we introduce ourselves. My name is Tom.
My name is Henry. I'm Carl.
My name is Michael.
I'm Craig.
Amir.
Jason.
Max. Scott. Francesco.
My name is Paul.
I'm Rick.
My name is Roy.
My name is Dana.
I'm Stu.
I'm Clint.
My name is Oswaldo.
I'm Larry.
Arthur. My name is Angel.
Kevin.
Jack.
My name is Cass.
I'm Brad. My name is David.
Risha.
I'm Jim.
Peter.
I'm Richard.
My name is Joe.
Jay.
Welcome, everyone. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to share something with you. So we have a Facebook page, which Joe set up, and I now sort of manage, and often get communications from people all around the world asking questions and inquiring. And so last night I was contacted by a gentleman who was asking about, sexuality and monogamy and being gay and all this stuff, and he's been on the Buddhist path. But so I explained a little bit, and then I said, we have almost 400 talks on our website that have been recorded, and I just did a search, and 7 of them mention sex in the title, so that would be a good place to start, And so he got back to me this morning, and here's what he wanted me to share with you. Baruch Golden's talk on right action and sexuality really inspired me. Be assured that I will be listening to more of these talks. I guess I've lived a rather constrained life sexually due to my long-held regard for intimacy as it relates to a mutually satisfying monogamous relationship according to Christian standards. I have 2 biological children in their late 20s. It's my hope that they will someday desire a mutually satisfying relationship with me. I came out 6 years ago. They've chosen to keep me at bay. They are Christian fundamentalists. To hear on the MP3 recordings, the men engaging in conversation, interjecting humor, and sharing their ideas and thoughts is refreshing. Please let them know I'm listening and that their participation there in California means so much to me, a guy in Illinois. Thank you. So, what we do here reverberates across the world. So we're very lucky to be here, but, understand that we're also sharing. So with that, I'd like to introduce the gentleman that he happened to mention, Baruch Golden. Baruch is a longtime GBF member who has been practicing Vipassana meditation since 1998. He completed Spirit Rock's Community Dharma Leaders Program in 2012 and the Buddhist Chaplaincy Training Program with the Sati Center in Redwood City in 2013. He teaches Dharma to many sitting groups in the Bay Area. Baruch is a registered nurse and has been doing hospice work for the past 14 years. Baruch, welcome back.
I just got back on Thursday. Part of my time I was assisting in a retreat for the first time for LGBTQ people and non-conforming gender people And I was just, and then there's been a lot of stuff going on, and I was thinking about how life is so simple that we can make it so complicated, and that really my path of practice has been to move towards simplicity and stillness. And here I am sitting in the middle of chaos and change and impermanence. And things in our life just change so quickly. So I wanted to read some lines from a Dharma poem. I considered a Dharma poem by Naomi Shahad Nye called Kindness. Not the whole poem, but I wanted to dedicate these verses to it's funny, having a lot of feeling. Paul Connolly, who two Sangha members, Paul Connolly, who died this past Wednesday, and then our Sangha member Hal Hershey, who he didn't die. He was in the hospital. He started his chemotherapy for treatment of leukemia. I did talk. I checked with them just to make sure it was okay to mention them. And actually, Hal asked me to mention his name, and I checked in with Chaz, Paul's partner, and I guess he's in LA. And Paul's dear friend is here, Dana. And and many other people who were friends with Paul and loved Paul and Chess. So anyway, kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all that must go. So you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. Before you know kindness is the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow, you must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows, and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. When, this is not what I wanted to talk about, but I just wanted to say that when life changes so quickly, people that we care about die or they get sick, there's a line in a Leonard Cohen song. He goes, "There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." And I think these sorts of things create a crack in us, which allow us to get in contact with deeper feelings that we have. We've all known lots of people who have died. We've all been through a lot of death. And one of the things that the Buddha recommended was the contemplations of what we call the 5 remembrances, and it's something that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about a lot. And I think when that opening is present, it's really a powerful time to do this kind of practice. And I wanted to read them. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are the only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. And when I was down in retreat in Yucca Valley, I started doing the practice because Paul had been sick for a while. And there's a way that we really deny that we are aging, and getting ill, or that the people around us are aging and getting ill. And so one of the benefits of doing this practice that the Buddha talked about, I was going to read it, and it was something that I wanted to talk a little bit about today, was loving kindness practice, metta practice. And the Buddha was characteristically precise about the benefits of doing metta practice, and one of the benefits that he said was you will die unconfused. He also said other benefits are people will love you, your face will be radiant, and then divas and animals will love you, divas will protect you. So that's very important, you know. The room is full of divas, so in all senses of the world. So right before I left for retreat a few weeks ago, I participated in this mindfulness study that came out of the John F. Kennedy University, the Holistic Research Center, and it was a study on meaning, mindfulness, and marginalization. And the thesis was that members of society, many members of society are seen as outsiders because of our sexual orientation or our gender, and that the practice, and that this has an impact on our meaning of life, our sense of meaning, and that there's previous research that talks about how mindfulness practice and being connected to a mindfulness community mitigates that. And so they're interested really in exploring kind of this whole aspect of mindfulness and marginalization, or we could just call it internalized homophobia. And it was a semi-structured interview. I'm pretty bad with time management, so. And I brought I have a very specific talk. If I don't use my notes, then I tend to go all over the place. And I really wanted to talk about this because when I was in retreat, when I was assisting in retreat, one of the things that I was doing was I was assisting in group interviews and individual interviews. And if those of you who have been on retreat, one of the things that happens is during the retreat, you meet with your teacher, or in my case, the assistant, and you talk about your practice. Because you're having this intense experience of practice. You're practicing all day. And so this talk comes out of the retreat. It's a talk about practice and how we can practice with kind of the conditions of our life. And specifically, I was thinking a lot about internalized gay oppression, because as I was sitting in the interviews listening to people talk about their life, it was there was a pretty big age range of people on the retreat. It was so evident to me. I saw and I felt the impact of homophobia. So when I participated in this research study, two of the questions that they asked really were to talk about stories about how mindfulness practice had been helpful to me. And immediately what I thought about was how in the years that I've been doing practice, I seldom hear Dharma teachers really reflect back to me what my immediate experience is. And I seldom hear people talk about things like homophobia. And even though we were sitting in this retreat with a lesbian Dharma teacher who has been teaching, I think, since 1992. And it's we're acknowledged in those talks. I've never heard her, don't tell her I said this, okay? Although she can listen, she might listen to the tape. I've never heard her talk about how you work with homophobia. So, So I wanted to talk about that. And I was thinking about, and I really wanted to talk about in relationship to metta practice, loving kindness practice. And I wanted to start with the story about the Dalai Lama, my experience with the Dalai Lama. In April of 2009, he was talking in Berkeley at the Greek Theater. Did anybody go hear him there? Yeah. And his talk basically was about peace through compassion practice, metta and compassion practice, using an interpreter. His English is good, but he's hard to understand for me. Anyway, so I had the opportunity, if you've ever been behind the Greek Theater, there's this space behind. And so I had an opportunity to greet the Dalai Lama because of my association with the Sangha in San Francisco that I was involved with. And so we were walking through, there was a long line, the Dalai Lama was sitting there. I love the Dalai Lama. And as I approached, I started having a lot of feelings about the Dalai Lama. I just started getting overwhelmed. As soon as I was facing him, I just collapsed right in front of him and went into this prostrate kind of bow in front of him. And then the next thing I felt was someone tapping on my head, and it was the Dalai Lama tapping on my head, and I heard him say, "That's good, very good." And then he gave me a signal to stand up, and I stood up. And that was it. That was my interaction with the Dalai Lama, but it was very impactful for me, and because of my particular struggles, I became very inspired to look into metta and compassion practice, and I was already doing compassion practice because I was working as a hospice nurse, and that comes up a lot. Bearing witness to the suffering and pain of other people, and I needed a way of working with that. So later that year, I went to a 2-week retreat, and Joseph Goldstein was there. He's an early Western Buddhist teacher, and he lives on the East Coast. And I was talking about my metta practice, which I was really trying to do very seriously, and talking about how I wasn't experiencing anything, I wasn't feeling anything, it really wasn't working for me. And he's not very precise. I don't know if any of you have listened to his talks, but he tends to talk a lot. And my 15-minute interview lasted about 2 minutes. And he basically said, "You're using too much effort." And he gave me a couple of suggestions. So then 5 days later, I met with him again, and I reported how I was using less effort, but there was no change. I still didn't feel anything. It wasn't working. And what he talked about at that point was, in metta practice, there's this practical progression of metta, and you begin with yourself, and then you move on to a mentor, teacher, a beloved friend, a neutral person, sometimes they call them stranger, someone you don't have either positive or negative feelings about. Then you move on to the enemy. That's how they refer to it in Buddhism, but we kind of changed that to the difficult person. And then you move on to all beings. And after I talked, he basically said that sometimes we can be our own difficult person. And that the reason I was having a lot of difficulties is because for me, I was the difficult person. And I was starting to do my practice there, and we do this progression. And after we have some experience doing metta, then we move on to the difficult person. So that really didn't sit right with me, and I went back to my room, and I was thinking about a talk that I'd heard by Sharon Salzberg, who wrote the book on loving kindness meditation, and she talked about how, as an alternate to choosing a difficult person, you can experiment by directing metta to a difficult aspect of yourself. And I'd never done that before. And it could be like a physical, emotional aspect, something that you struggle with, something that you're in denial about, something that you're avoiding, something that you're at war with. And so I changed my metta at that point, and I started practicing. When I practice with myself, I practice just with difficult aspects of myself. And of course the phrases change slightly when you're doing that kind of work. one of the phrases I used was, may I be filled with loving kindness towards this aspect of myself. So, yipes. So metta is one of the early foundational practices that the Buddha talked about. He talked about it as an antidote to really negative mind states, unwholesome mind states. He identified fear and denial and delusion. I just include any negative mind state. And there are so many that we can include. So I think it includes irritation, agitation, bewilderment, feeling discouraged, feeling unloved, defeated, shut down, rejected, left out, guilty, shame, of course, annoyed, disrespected. I mean, it's everything. So really the practice really addresses that whole field of negative feelings that come out. And he talked about it as a way of abandoning negative mind states, or he calls them unwholesome mind states, and cultivating wholesome mind states or positive feelings. So when I was at the retreat, one of my tasks was they almost always do daily metta instruction. And one of my jobs was I was offering the daily metta instruction, and I knew that before I was going to go, and I didn't know I was going to do it every day, but I was doing it every day, and I started doing the practice ahead of time because one of my teachers suggested before you talk about something, you practice with what you're talking about. So, but when I got there, because of offering the instructions, something happened and I really dropped down deeply into the practice, and I started having strong feelings of loving kindness towards all the people on the retreat. And it became very tangible experience for me in the past couple of weeks when I was doing the practice. Metta is considered to be like a gateway practice, kind of like a gateway drug. It's how you get into the Brahma Viharas, and the Brahma Viharas are 4 types of love that the Buddha taught. And he said, I'm sort of paraphrasing here. He said that with regular practice, they're so powerful that they can transform our thoughts, actions, and behaviors. So these neurotic thoughts that we have, that I have, that probably we all have, the self-judgment and self-criticism that we have with regular practice diminish, they fade away, they weaken, and eventually they fall away completely. And then with the practice, and probably some of you have had these experiences, we start having these moments or longer periods of time where we feel caring and loving feelings towards other people. We start feeling compassion and empathetic joy and equanimity, which are the 4 types of love that the Buddha taught. So, and this is said to come from the goodness of our heart. So it's kind of an awakening. It's sort of the same thing as kind of cracking the heart open so that we are experiencing these particular energies that the Buddha would call wholesome. The Thai meditation teacher, Ajahn Chah, said everything occurs within the heart. So, with the practice, if we start slowing down, we start noticing how the heart feels. So getting back to the research, the researcher, his name is Zeb. These are 2 of the questions that he asked me. He said, can you share a story when mindfulness helped you cope with the negative impact of marginalization in your life? Can you share a story when mindfulness helped you feel a sense of belonging, coherence, and connection with purpose of life? And I immediately, quite a few stories came up for me, and the first really significant story that came up for me was I was kind of an early seeker. I started practicing in another tradition when I was 20 years old, transcendental meditation. And within a short period of time, the TM organization, or TM movement, international movement, offered what they called advanced techniques. The cities, I don't know, has anyone taken have you done the cities? Mm-hmm. Yes. So, it's true, right? And the cities were taken from the Yoga Sutras, which are often talked about as superpowers or super abilities. Mm-hmm. And one of the one that got the big billing was walking on water, or the flying technique, which I was very interested in. It was just like, that would be a cool superpower to have. So I very much wanted to be successful with this, and I think I was like 20 or 21. I was convinced that it wouldn't work, and the reason I was convinced that it wouldn't work was because I'm gay. And at the time, there was this distinctive homophobia that ran through the TM movement. There were some friends of mine at the time, actually all Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, who were TM teachers, and they had told me that if the TM movement knew that you were gay, that they wouldn't let you become a TM teacher. So anyway, I believe in prayer. I prayed and prayed and prayed. When I finally got the techniques, it was quite successful. It was very powerful practice for me for a long time. About the time that I had that experience with the Dalai Lama, a psychotherapist friend of mine, who I used to lament to about a lot of stuff, I guess a lot of negative stuff, gave me a list of negative cognitions. And I was shocked to see that a lot of the cognitions listed on the page were kind of chronic beliefs that I had internalized so deeply that I just considered those beliefs to be a part of myself. So I wanted to read some of them to you. And part of the practice, I think, is doing this kind of turning the attention on our own minds and our conditioning that we have, is naming our experience. I think it's so important to name what our experience is. It's not something that's really emphasized in practice. Usually the instruction is just to turn towards the distraction long enough to kind of do a very brief investigation and then come back to the anchor, like your breath or the sounds or whatever it is that you're using. So I wanted to read some of them. Negative cognition statements. I am worthless. I am not lovable. I do not deserve fill in the blank. I'm a bad person. I'm a failure. I'm terrible. I'm not good enough. I am permanently damaged. Which is kind of how I felt at the time that I was doing that TM. I no longer feel that way. Usually, mostly. I am stupid. I am invisible. I am different. I don't belong. And then there's corresponding positive ones. I should probably read some of those, just so that I am worthy. I am lovable. I am a good person. I am smart. I matter. I deserve to be happy, which is very similar to one of the meta phrases, loving kindness phrases, is may I be happy. So in the past few years, I've inclined my practice to work very directly on my own conditioning, what it is that I believe. And part of the practice is turning our attention on the areas that we're not aware of. As we practice, we become more aware of what and how our minds function. And I started seeing it as a possible, loving kindness practice as a possible antidote to the impact of homophobia, which is still so destructive and present in this culture right now. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I was sitting with young people at this retreat that were in their 20s, and I've often heard people say, oh, it's not that bad. It is bad, listening to their experience, because we're growing up in this society where we're all being conditioned in a lot of negative ways. So I wanted to, I don't think I'll get through everything, but it doesn't matter. I wanted to, if you don't, how many people have done metta, loving kindness practice? So there is some familiarity with it, okay. Well, just if you haven't done it, or for those of us who don't believe that metta works, or have never felt the power of metta, which is my experience, I wanted to cite a study, scientific study that came out in 2008, called Open Hearts Build Lives, Positive Emotions Induced Through Loving Kindness Meditation. And I thought at the time it was a pretty cool study because it happened and there's been a lot of studies on loving kindness meditation. At least 5 that I'm aware of when I was paying attention to this kind of stuff. It happened in Detroit, Michigan. It was at a company called CompuWare. I don't know what they do. 1,800 people were working there. They sent out this email to everybody inviting them to participate in the study. 200 people responded. And they set up this study, they call it a waitlist control, where they took half the people and used them as control subjects, so they didn't give them the intervention, and half the people got the intervention. I hope that's clear. And then after the first group went through and had the intervention, then the second group who didn't get it went through the same intervention, and they studied them before and after they had the intervention. Is that clear? Anyway, so the study was just straight out loving kindness meditation. It was 1 hour of instruction for 7 weeks. And they did the traditional thing. They began with self. Love. They moved to loved ones, to acquaintances. They came up with different categories because this is totally secular. Strangers, and finally all living beings. And they asked them to practice 5 days a week for 15 to 20 minutes. And on average, the participants in the study practiced it 80 minutes a week. So that's just what their practice was. They just doing loving kindness meditation. And they used an incredible number of test measures. They looked at psychological, social, physical resources, outcome measures, emotion and meditative practices. And they had them do this daily reporting measure. One of the things they gave them was a list of 19 emotions, and they had them rate their experience with these different emotions. So what they found was that the practice of loving kindness meditation led to shifts in people's daily experience of a wide range of positive emotions. So people tended to have more positive emotions. That the effect of the intervention became evident after 3 weeks of practice, and that persisted for at least 2 weeks after the intervention had ended. So they followed the people for 2 weeks after. And they said people became more satisfied with their lives, that they had a loving attitude towards themselves and others. They were more self-accepting. They were more appreciative of social support. And there was a change in, kind of sounds like a miracle, huh? So anyway, it's a science thing. If you want the citation, I could give it to you. You could look at it yourself. So whether we believe it or not, it works. And part of the deal with metta, especially for people who have had a lot of negative conditioning, like people in our community, is that sometimes it's hard for us to feel the impact of the practice. And so if we don't feel anything, then we'll just abandon it because it's not working. But with metta, it scientifically shown in several studies that if you do it, it does work, and that the effect happens after you're doing the practice regularly for a couple weeks. So the Buddha said that the Buddhist path leads directly from bondage to freedom. But reflecting back on my practice, it often feels like a torturous road through these unexpected twists and turns. And I think that just reflects on I'll just speak for myself, my own entangled mental topography. I think unless we are born, and there are some people that are born with exceptionally mature and wholesome roots, maybe 1 in 100 people who do practice, maybe someone here sitting in this room, that our practice it's not direct like a crow flies, but it goes through the winding twists and turns of our mind. So it involves kind of a slow, steady, and cautious journey. So we begin with this unique constellation of personal qualities, potentials, habits, wounds, and then we also carry the extra weight of growing up in a culture that's very negative. There's a lot of negativity directed towards LGBTQ people. So we bring this extra weight with us into our practice. Unless we start practicing in that area, then progress can be really slow. And the Buddha said that we should include our entire experience in our practice. Everything. In my experience with a lot of identifying as gay or queer and being in Western Buddhist settings with mostly heterosexual teachers is that unless they name something, I just never thought about practicing in that area. And that was one of the reasons why I did the talk on sex, because I had never heard anybody talk about sex and the Dharma. And that talk was very popular for a while. I ended up giving several talks related to sex in different sitting groups because you just don't hear about it. You just don't. Anyway, and there is... So what we have to do is we have to do this honest self-assessment of our minds, hearts, and bodies. And that can be very difficult. There's a lot of conditioning, internal conditioning against that. As soon as something uncomfortable comes up, we tend to contract away from it, go into the future, go into the past, or start having what we call restless mind, a lot of thoughts. So in the Buddhist teachings, the Buddha actually talked about the importance of doing an honest self-assessment for spiritual growth. There's a teaching with one of his two main disciples, Sariputta, who became an arhat, fully liberated person. Actually, everybody around the Buddha at that time was almost fully liberated. Would have been a great person to be around at that time. We need to find someone like that now. So I just wanted to read this. Sariputta says, just as a dirty bronze bowl deposited in a dusty place and utterly neglected only becomes dirtier and dustier, so if we fail to recognize the blemishes of our minds, we will not make any effort to eliminate them, but will continue to harbor greed, hate, and delusion, and will die with a confused mind. And just as a dirty bowl, which is cleaned and polished, will in time come bright and radiant, so if we recognize the blemishes of our mind, we will arouse our energy to purity, to purify them, and having purged ourselves of blemishes, we will die with an undefiled mind. So one of his main disciples was saying, yeah, we have to really pay attention. And it's so easy to just kind of come, sit, space out, and leave, and then just lead your life, and then become frustrated that things aren't really changing. I know that I did that for many years. When I was in the retreat and I was listening and doing the individual interviews, we asked people a lot of questions about their practice. It's like, well, tell me about your practice. And when we're not in retreat, people usually don't spend a lot of time thinking about their practice. They just feel thankful that they are practicing. Like if we sit down for 10 or 15 or 30 or 45 minutes, that's a huge accomplishment with so much distraction. In retreat, we're really directing people to pay attention to what their immediate experience is. And there's a standard set of responses that the teacher gives. And they all are to turn towards your experience, to know what it is that you're experiencing. Anytime we experience any kind of resistance, which is really anytime we feel uncomfortable with what's going on with us, the instruction is to turn towards that, meet the resistance. We need to learn what our defenses are. So we need to meet our defenses. And a really powerful thing that I heard, and that I really had heard before, but is and Arena Weissman, who was teaching the retreat, said often is, don't be afraid to turn towards suffering. Don't be afraid to turn towards your suffering. So there are many other things. So we really have to attend to our own blemishes, as Sariputta said, our flaws, our imperfections, if we want to progress in our practice, if we want to see changes in our life. Taking from the suttas, we have to penetrate the dense barriers of our ingrained defilements and obstinate delusions. And this really is very counter to, what we do in our life usually. I mean, we're basically turning our attention, we're observing the seat of observation itself. We're turning our awareness on our mind, the center from which we see the world. I think that's really kind of powerful. And so we're looking at the mind's motives, our views, our beliefs, our opinions, our desires, our aversions, our confusions. So we're coming up against our own sense of our personal identity. And that really takes training to turn towards that. And that's what the practice is really about, is turning towards the places in our practice where we get uncomfortable. Sometimes I hear teachers talk about, practicing on your learning edge. And there's a real, we really privilege being comfortable. We want to be comfortable, we want to be happy, and this is going counter to that. So we're looking at who we feel and think we are, how we describe ourselves to ourselves and to other people, and the different identities that we take on, how strongly we're attached to them. And we are not carving out anything. We're kind of being brutal with ourselves. We're just kind of turning towards all of that as far as our practice. But our minds are very clever, and we've developed all these patterns to prevent ourselves from really looking and seeing things that bother us. And I've noticed this myself a lot, is that I even manipulate people and situations in ways that validate myself. It's sort of, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but you can think about that. It might make sense. So, I guess I just want to tell you a story. I want to tell you something that one of my teachers would say to me a lot, Gina Sharp, on the East Coast. She goes, what are the habits of your mind and heart that have caused your own suffering? And what habits of mind and heart would you need to establish and practice in your life that will move you towards greater freedom? So she's really talking about the self-assessment that's really important part of spiritual work. So I wanted to tell you a story about something that happened to me at work. Until recently, I was working at Kaiser as a hospice nurse. And I had a very uncomfortable interaction with my supervisor. She came up to me and she told me about a patient complaint, which I always hate when patients complain. Kaiser takes it very serious, which they should. Anyway, and there was a lot of shaming for me because this was the patient's sister, and the patient's sister was lesbian. And so it was coming from someone in my community. So there's a lot of shaming. The whole interaction lasted maybe 3 or 4 minutes. But I started noticing that every day that I drove to work, I started having these subtle feelings of fear that I might run into my supervisor again and that I might have another unpleasant interaction. And it grew to the point that I started avoiding her. I would come in early because she tended to come in late. I would leave as quickly as I could, and I started becoming increasingly anxious about the possibility of running into her. And even when I woke up on days that I had to work, I started having this subtle feeling of dread. So at the time I had read that the first thought of the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, upon awakening is a prayer for love and compassion, dedicating all of the coming actions of the day to the benefits of all living beings, which I thought was very beautiful. And then I was starting my work day with fear. I was like, this isn't good. So I decided I would talk to my supervisor. I kind of blurted out that I wanted to talk with her. I acknowledged the incident, and I said I was sorry for the impact that my behavior had on the family. And she looked really puzzled, like she didn't even know what I was talking about. And she thought for a while, and she kind of remembered, and she goes, oh, I forgot about that a long time ago. That family complains about everybody. She goes, it's just my job to tell you, but don't even worry about it. And I realized that love was a choice in any situation, and that I had chose to live in fear. And so that was really a powerful moment of insight for me, that we always have this choice, and that if we are cultivating energies that are wholesome or loving, kind, and warm, that it moves us in a balance towards those energies, or we can sit with more negative, unwholesome energies, and we could let those energies direct how we feel. I think we all long to love more deeply and to feel really connected to people. And there's a way, even if we're in a relationship, that the heart can contract and create this separation that we feel from other people and even from ourselves. So even though we crave love, a lot of times we can feel lonely if we really stop and pay attention. There's a lot of ways to avoid noticing that. So the practice is really an investigation of our minds. And using the practice to abandon those negative mind states and cultivate the positive mind states. I wanted to end with a Dharma poem by Rumi, The Guest House, which I'm sure you've all heard a zillion times. But the Buddha actually, I guess Rumi was inspired by this, but there are a couple teachings by the Buddha where he talks about a guest house. And he talks about it very similarly to the way that Rumi talks about it in his poem. The Buddha says that we need to recognize the guest, or whatever it is that is showing up for us. We need to understand it. We need to let go of it. We need to allow it, but let go of it. We need to learn what is to be learned and what is to be developed. So basically, he's really asking us to welcome whatever it is that is in our immediate experience. So Buddha talked about that. So I wanted to read the poem, and then wanted to end with this, The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. They may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever, or I would add whatever, comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So, thank you for your attention. We've run out of time. I haven't run out of things to talk about, but I ran out of time.
Thank you for that. That was terrific. Next week will be David Lewis, and then follow the week after. after by Roy King. Our Sangha is sustained by Dana, the practice of generosity. And so we encourage you to be generous in this guest house that we're all in. And so the suggested donation is $8 to $10. There's a Dana bowl out there. Our host will also go around with that in case you missed the Dana bowl, just to give you the opportunity. We gathered for a social period afterwards for 30 minutes with tea and snacks and stuff. So as we do that, please make our 4 newcomers welcome. Dana, Stu,
Arthur, it's been a while since
Arthur and Angel. So welcome to all of you. Do we have our host? There he is, Cass.
So yes, stay and enjoy the fellowship of the Sangha. There's some refreshments, hot water for tea, and some munchables that are all vegan. If you have tea, put your cup in the sink and I'll into it afterwards. There's a sign-up sheet on the credenza over here if you want to get on a mailing list. And at 12:30, some people gather at the front door and go out to lunch. Anybody's welcome to join them and participate in that.
Other announcements?
Yes, the GBF board created a new Yahoo group, GBF Care. I'm going to just read our mission statement. A place where San Francisco Bay Area GBF members to request and provide assistance following temporary life events such as injury, surgery, other unforeseen tragedy. This may take the form of shopping, transportation, friendly visits, or emotional support. The idea being it's a identifying people in need. No one's asking anyone to sign up to. You decide. You've got the information. An example of Paul was surrounded by a tremendous amount of support. He was truly blessed. So many people loved him. Not everybody necessarily has that kind of support. So it's a way for letting fellow members know. Everyone on the GBF mailing list will get an invitation, and you'll decide whether you want to be part of that or not. And if anyone has any other questions, you could find me later.
Roy.
I actually have a question about Hal. Is he taking visitors at the hospital?
He's home. He's home now.
He is home now.
Yeah, he was just there for his first chemo.
Okay.
I'm sure he'd be happy to hear from people.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to announce that every Monday in this very room, the San Francisco LGBT Sangha meets. Same format as GBF. 5:30 to 6 is silent meditation, 6 to 6:30 is a Dharma talk. So it's just a 1-hour program. But if you want to continue your practice Sunday and Monday, it's a beautiful little Sangha, diverse Sangha. We have a couple of core teachers and guest teachers. And every Monday here at 5:30. You're all welcome.
Thank you. Any other announcements?
I have just a quick one. I'm also the coordinator of the host, and we could use a few more alternates if anybody's interested in that as a way of giving back to the Sangha. It's relatively easy and fun way to participate. So we actually 2 weeks from now have an opening. So if anybody is interested in doing a test run, speak to me during the social hour.
Thank you. By the way, the poem, Before You Know What Kindness Really Is printed in this current newsletter, which is available.
What a coincidence.
That's great.
That's cool.
Coincidences today. So yeah, me getting that note from that guy mentioning me specifically last night, this morning, it's quite nice. So why don't we gather in a circle for our dedication of merit? By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.